Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Welcome to Secrets of Organ Playing podcast number 128. Today is Sunday, January 7th, 2018. And today's special guest is the organist from Australia, John Higgins, who is the organist at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Morwell in Victoria, Australia. And John has been a guest a while ago on our podcast. We talked about when he was living in another state in southern Australia, in this small city called Whyalla. Now he's living in Traralgon, moved with his family, and I'm very excited to be able to talk with John about his recent Christmas concert that he played for his congregation. And thank you so much, John, for joining in this conversation. You're very generous, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Vidas. It's a real privilege and honor to speak with you again.
We've been friends for a long time, right? You were one of the first subscribers of our Secrets of Organ Playing blog, I think from the beginning of 2012, right? You were the early pioneers and found our website very early on, and you actually stuck with us for 6 years now. Thank you so much, John, for sticking with us in this long 6 years organ playing journey. And I'm very glad to be able to help you grow as an organist.
Yes, well, I'm so thankful that I came across your website and for all the help and advice you've given me, because it's one thing to be enthusiastic, but you also need the skills and the techniques and practice the right way. And there's no way that I might not even be playing the organ at all if it wasn't for you.
Absolutely. Sometimes we have this passion, but we don't have teachers. We don't have teaching materials, right? But today with technology, we can connect with you online across the globe. Literally, Australia is almost on the other side of the globe, right? Actually, Vilnius, Lithuania is on the other side of the globe as New Zealand. So Australia is not very far from New Zealand, right? And it's amazing how we can communicate. It's early morning in Vilnius and late afternoon or evening in Traralgon, right? Fantastic. So, John, I'm very eager to know about your initiative of playing Christmas concert. How did you decide to play this each year? I think you're playing a few years in a row this Christmas concert, right? So tell us a little bit about your musical adventure.
Yes, so after I'd been studying with you for about a year, I was very excited about playing for my family and friends. And seeing as we were living, well, after we were married, we moved away to Whyalla. And so when we organ to play on for family and friends, because our church didn't have a pipe organ, or my family's original church didn't have a pipe organ. And so the church where we were married had a pipe organ, and I'd kept in touch with the organist there and become quite good friends with him. And I asked him if he would mind if I played for my family and friends when we came back for Christmas. And he said, would I mind if anybody else from the church attended? And I said, no, of course not. I'm happy if anybody wants to come, as long as they don't have too higher expectations, because I was only a beginner. And so that was how it started. And then every year when we came back for Christmas holidays, I would contact them a few months before and organise the date and the time and provide them with a brochure, flyer, invitations, and then we would have an evening of music. And my wife, who plays the flute at a very high level, we'd do duets together sometimes. And my two cousins, one of them plays classical guitar and the other one plays the flute as well. I was able to persuade them to join in as well. So it's quite a family event. And this year was the seventh concert, and I'm really thrilled that it has become quite a tradition that everyone expects it now.
You see, John, you're doing something very wonderful. Every 5 or 10 recitals or concerts or public appearances, usually we get a breakthrough, right? Something changes in how we treat the instrument, how we treat the music, how we treat ourselves on the stage. Did you discover something that you haven't thought of before this year? For example, did you find out something new about yourself or your music or the instrument?
Yes, many things. I find every time I play in public, I learn something new. Even playing for just an ordinary church service, I feel like I learn something every time, and particularly because I'm very early in my organist career, there's so much to learn and so much experience to be gained. And if I just reflect on the Christmas concerts for a moment, last year's, I was quite down actually because I felt like I made a mess of it. I'd played my pieces reasonably well, and because I was so passionate about the pipe organ, I wanted to share with people a little bit of a demonstration of the organ. So just showing the different stops and the difference between the string sounds and flutes and trumpets and diapasons or principals. And I was so excited in showing everyone this demonstration during the concert that I got a little bit carried away and lost track of time. And the whole concert went for about an hour and a half, and this demonstration went for probably a bit more than 15 minutes. And afterwards I had quite a lot of, nobody was nasty, but I had quite a lot of negative feedback about how long it went for, and that people just wanted to hear music and not hear about the pipe organ. And I was quite upset about that. And then the minister and the organist sent an email with some feedback from the people that was very similar to what they were saying to me on the evening of the event. And that was quite difficult to deal with that. And this time around, I was very nervous and apprehensive and had a lot of doubts in my mind about, do they want me to come back, and worrying about the time and how long it was going to go for. And I was quite stressed about making sure that it finished on time, because they said we only want it to go for an hour this year. And I felt a little bit hurt that they only wanted to hear it for an hour, because I think that's quite short for an organ recital, even because there's other instruments as well. The guitar, my cousin plays the guitar for 10 or 15 minutes, and the flute duets as well. So it's not like it's just heavy organ music. Anyway, this time around, it was about 5 minutes to go before 1 hour was up, and I had two pieces left that was going to take about 8 minutes. And I said to the audience, I have two pieces left that will take 8 minutes. but there's only 5 minutes of my time left. Would you like me to play one piece or two?
Fantastic. And what did they say?
Well, there was one person in the audience who shouted out, "Can we have 10 more pieces?"
Oh, you see, it's
So,
quite a change.
but what I noticed was I actually had to change my thinking a bit on the audience. I felt like this year was a real breakthrough that all of the people who were there had embraced me. And unfortunately, there was quite a few less people this year than last year. And I know that some of the people that were critical of me last year didn't come this year. But I felt that was very positive because I felt that all the people who were there were the ones that really believed in me and the ones that really enjoyed what I was doing. And all the feedback I had this year was overwhelmingly positive, and people wanting me to come back and even saying things like, if you ever move back here, you can be one of the organists too.
I see. That's quite an achievement, John. Of course, I can suspect last year, if they were expecting organ music, right, and you were demonstrating the organ and talking about the pipes and how they work, they misunderstood your intentions, right? And they were not prepared for that, probably in advance. They came for organ music, right? Probably for popular organ classics, probably, and that's why some of them were disappointed, right? And this time, since you didn't do demonstration, right, and you even communicated with them an idea of omitting one piece, right, and closing on time for 1 hour at the time mark, you sort of show that you care about them even more, right? And you're not even offended if they said, no, one would be enough, right? Or let's stop now. It's too much for us, right? Let's meet next year, right? You went that extra mile, I think, and put yourself on the line. I wouldn't imagine many people dare of suggesting to their audience, would you like 2 pieces or 1 piece right now for the closing, right? Because they're so eager to play everything, but you're so relaxed, right? And not holding onto the idea of playing everything that you know, right? So that was, I think, the major leap forward for you too.
I certainly learnt a lot too, that this particular audience, the only time they see me is once a year at the Christmas concert, whereas all the other public performances that I've played have been with people who are in the same town where I live, or where I've had an opportunity to build a rapport and relationships with people. And that was something I was quite keen to ask you to tap into your wisdom and experience of how to gauge an audience in new places that you go to, and trying to tap into what they would like to hear, and I guess striking a balance, isn't it, between pleasing the audience but also educating them and taking them to a place where they are maybe not comfortable.
Well, exactly. If you are leading them, there is always a danger of going too far, right? If you are 10 steps ahead of them, they will lose you, or maybe you will lose them. They won't understand the genius of your invention and proposition. If you are just following them and playing just crowd pleasers, right? Popular classics all the time, D minor toccata and nothing else, is popular arrangements of I don't know, Christmas carols, then they, of course, they would be happy, but it's like answering people's questions on the podcast sometimes, right? If we only answer and give people what they want, it's good, right? But we have to also provide some I don't know, wisdom that they haven't thought about that, and to take them one step further, to lead them a little bit, not too far, but enough for them to feel safe and challenged at the same time. That's
So
what
what
you
would
did.
be the different what would be the differences in how you prepare a recital, for example, when you did all of your training in America compared to in Lithuania or another overseas country? What sort of things would you think about in relation to your audience and what you might play?
I think in every case, in America, Australia, or Lithuania, it's important to connect. And one of the best ways to connect is to talk, to introduce music verbally with your own voice, with your own interpretation of the music verbally, so that you connect with them and explain, of course. On the other hand, explaining music is like very dry thing, right? You have to tell stories, actually. You have to relate and compare things that are intangible, right? Music is, you cannot really touch music, right? And if we always say here is C major and there is D minor, or listen how this tenor part sounds, it doesn't speak to people's mentality that well. It doesn't connect. We have to tell stories. Sometimes we have to tell stories about composers' life. We have to figure out how the piece was put together, sometimes in musical terms, and sometimes we have to tell stories how those musical things relate to everyday life's experiences, right? Sometimes, like for example, the famous F major toccata, right, by Bach, BWV 540. There is the famous opening of long pedal point on the note F for 1 page and a half, and the two parts in the hand, they play a canon, right? The right hand, I think, leads at first, and the left hand follows, and then they switch, of course. So Pamela Reuter-Finstra from Michigan, when Osha and I studied with her at Eastern Michigan University back in 2000, maybe 3, I believe, she said that imagine that those two parts in the hands are two squirrels chasing each other, like playing with each other, and one is running away and the other is following, like in a canon, right? So of course I was a musician, and I understood those musical terms and canons, but it was still very fun way to describe. And I always, whenever I play this or whenever I write about this piece, I always include this comparison about squirrels, right? And people can relate because a lot of us remember small animals chasing each other and how fun it is to watch them, right? So these things could be very beneficial to talk about and can connect with your audience. I don't know if I answered your question a little bit.
If you don't mind, I'll include another little story. So one of the pieces that I played was an improvisation on "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God" by Martin Luther.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, it was 500 years since the Reformation this year.
True.
I believe that the celebration was I think it was the 31st of October.
Yeah,
Was the
Reformation Sunday.
date.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I spent many weeks developing the ideas that I wanted to work on in my improvisation, and I found it so helpful, your articles on it, that it isn't just sitting down on the organ bench mindlessly and waiting for some inspiration from heaven to come upon you, that the great masters practiced it and thought about the ideas and constructing the ideas like musical sentence. So I spent many weeks planning those things and how I might do it. And I used this improvisation in the concert at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. It was 20 years since the organ was restored, and I improvised on A Mighty Fortress then, and I did it again for this Christmas concert. But I went to quite a great length to introduce it and to tell people that I wanted to get across to them something of the struggle that Martin Luther went through, that he was really going against the ideas of the church at the time, and was quite radical how he was fighting against the system and exposing some of the wrong practices and returning to biblical truth of that we are saved by grace through faith, not by paying indulgences.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, to convey that struggle, I'm going to play a lot of dissonant chords at the start, and using very dark texture with playing at the bottom of the keyboard with reeds, and using the swell box with cornopian and oboe to add a dark colour in minor key. And then I explained that I was like a ray of sun coming through the clouds. I was then going to introduce the theme of the hymn tune, and I just had several bars as a fugue introducing that first line of the hymn. And then I was very brave and tried one of your suggestions of putting the tune in the pedals with a French style toccata. So that was the first time I'd ever tried that, and that was quite difficult and scary, but it went very well, and I was really blown away by how much of an impression that made on people at both St. Andrews and also in Victor Harbor. And I even had people who were organists coming up to me and saying that we don't improvise and we don't like the idea of having improvisations in a concert, but we found that yours was so approachable that we really enjoyed it, and we hope that you might do that again.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you did it, John. Do you improvise regularly at home?
I wouldn't say it's a regular thing that I incorporate into my practice, but every few months I'm always on the lookout for opportunities. So whether it be a hymn tune to improvise on at the end of a service, or a Christmas carol. So I also did an improvisation on Joy to the World, which is a very popular Christmas carol. And I thought, rather than just playing through the carol, if I could improvise on it, then it adds interest, but it also connects with people because they know the tune so well.
Mm-hmm. True. So that's what leading is, right? You are using a familiar tune, giving people what they want, actually, right? But then you are taking them to a place they haven't dared to go yet. They haven't thought about that, if it's possible, right? To play improvisation or on Joy to the World. So I'm delighted to know that you are brave enough to try and put yourself at risk, right? Because it could fail, actually, right? There is a risk of failing. How do you deal with this pressure, John?
I was certainly quite concerned how people would take having two improvisations in one concert. I I thought I thought it would be fair to have one, but having two in the same program, I thought that was a big risk. But I thought that if I did one on A Christmas Carol, Joy to the World, I thought that that would provide enough connection that people would understand why. And it was interesting. One person made a comment to me and said that I played Bach's Toccata in D minor to start with, and they said because we knew that piece so well, we knew where you slipped up. I had a little bit of a mistake, a few little slip ups, but when it came to the improvisations, they said it was such a new experience hearing that sort of music portrayed in that way that they didn't really know what to expect. They didn't know right from wrong, as in the right notes from the wrong notes. And I think they were really carried along by the idea more than the perfection of the notes, if that makes sense. And it seemed like it left the idea of it left quite an impression, and having the tune in the pedals with almost full organ and heavy reeds in the pedal, I don't think they'd ever really heard the organ used in that way before.
Good idea, John. I want to ask you this. Have you recorded your concert this year?
Yes.
You did? Excellent. I have a idea for you to transcribe your improvisations and put it into music notation, right? If you like, for other people to play. Would that be interesting for you?
It's interesting you say that because I had one thought that I think there is a sense where improvisations are appropriate for that moment. And I gained that, I learnt that from listening to one of your other podcasts. I wonder if it might have been, was it Peter Holder from St. Paul's Cathedral in London,
Could
was
be.
talking about that. And he said that the value of improvisations is in that moment. And I was content just to play it, and that's the end of it. But I have had a couple of people suggest to me that I should put pen to paper and actually write out the composition of those and maybe improve it, which would be even better.
Exactly. A lot of organ compositions first started as improvisations. Exactly. And the other way around, a lot of organ compositions were conceived as models for improvisation too. So people could learn how to improvise in earlier styles, in earlier ages, right? So it's good that you recorded yourself, and it would be a fun exercise and not very easy actually to take musical dictation from your own playing. Maybe, you know what I'm suggesting? You put those videos on YouTube, right? Or it could be done locally on your computer, because YouTube has the ability of playing half speed while preserving the pitch level. If you have the same software on your computer, you could do the same locally, and then you could play it back very, very slowly and almost notate it note by note in real time. Almost. Not quite, but it would be much faster than always stopping and going back, stopping and going back in fast speed, right? What do you think about that, John?
Yes, no, it's as I say, I've had two people ask me about this, and seeing as the impression that it's made on people, I think it would be helpful to me, and maybe someone else would get some benefit. Something that really you have helped me tremendously was you'd referred me on to your friends William Porter and Tom Trenny,
Yeah.
who I hadn't ever come across them before on YouTube, but I've spent a lot of time listening to their improvisations, and I also bought the DVD of William Porter on his improvisation masterclass. And the thing that struck me most from William and Tom was they spoke of the improvisation being relevant to the tune, and some of the improvisations that you come across are technically spectacular, but at the end of it, I sometimes struggle to find the meaning, and I don't feel like it's made any impression on me. Maybe 3-4 minutes into it, you just start to zone out because it hasn't captivated you. Whereas I find their improvisations are so clever with repeating the theme in different ways and keeping it interesting. And I really made an effort with both of these improvisations to um, to keep the theme fresh, to keep the audience connected with the theme. And
Mm-hmm.
when I've seen some of the other improvisations online, I can't help thinking that this one has more meaning. So I think it could be worth preserving, but we'll see what everyone else says.
It would be a good exercise, right? Of course, it can't be perfect, entire the whole thing from the beginning until the end, right? Because it's on the spot, it's in the moment. Your left hand sometimes slips, and you follow it. You make it on purpose, and you make surprises, musical surprises, right? But when you try to transcribe it on paper or using your computer, then you can, as you say, improve it, make it a real organ piece. Sometimes that's how I create the music too. I have a keyboard next to my computer attached, and I improvise the hand part first and then the pedal part first on the Sibelius notation, and magically entire piece comes out right away, except the notation is all messed up with syncopations and weird rhythms, because the metronome is very strict and not flexible, right? And human mind is flexible. Human playing is unpredictable sometimes, and therefore I have to, uh, you know, uh, edit some things. But that's of course like a second draft. The first draft is just filling up the canvas, like painters would say, and then the final draft would be make it even more complete and playable, right? Uh, Include registration notations and articulation and dynamics, all those things that a stranger would need to know how to perform this piece. So think about that, um, but not for too long, because your mind has to be fresh in order to remember what you did, even though you will be transcribing from the recording, right? It's still possible to forget those things. Excellent.
That might be an excellent lead into something else I was going to speak to you about. You were talking about registration in the improvisation, and I think that's critical because without the right registration, I think some of my ideas would be lost. This particular concert I did all of the registration myself, and I had quite a few challenges. This particular organ was set up with the preset pistons. It had 4 preset pistons for the swell and 4 for the grate, and then it has another 3 for the swell that is for the reeds. And one of the pieces I played, unfortunately, I made a bit of a hash of it because I pressed the wrong preset. It was a bit tricky on the swell. The trumpet, which is the loudest stop, comes out on piston number 2, and just the trumpet on its own, and preset number 3 was full swell, and for whatever reason I must have pressed the wrong preset, and gave myself quite a surprise. And so I thought I'd ask, from your experience, how you adjust to new organs. How do you manage the presets? Do you tend to do the stop changes yourself? Because I think if I'd had a registration assistant, I think that problem would have been avoided and I could have concentrated on playing. But I took the risk because I didn't have anybody to do it for me. And then by making that mistake with the piston, then distracts you from playing, and then it can spiral downwards.
You're right, John. This is a problematic situation when you try to do everything yourself. And if you didn't have enough time to prepare on that instrument, the changes, right, the switches, the pistons, or even the stop changes by your hand, it takes a lot of energy and sometimes confuses you. It takes your focus of the music, and you make additional mistakes because of that. And sometimes people even panic and freeze and lose track of their music. So it's better, of course, to rehearse stop changes if you are planning to doing this yourself. For example, in Victor Harbor, you knew the organ well, and in your church in Morwell, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, of course, you know the organ too, right? So you could think about what to do well in advance, how the stops are laid out in a relationship with the keyboards. Where are those pistons? And when you're practicing at the home on your keyboard or on the piano or on the even on the table, you could imitate those motions with your feet or fingers, pretending it's a real situation, and then your physical movements will prepare you for the real situation, real thing. Would that be helpful?
Yes, that's right, and it's certainly that was one of the main focuses of my preparation, and it was just unfortunate, I suppose, in the heat of the moment that even though I knew what I was supposed to do, I've obviously bumped the wrong piston or been confused with the fact that full swell was a different piston to what it would be logically would make sense. So I think if I played on that organ regularly, I would ask the organist to have that changed because it doesn't really make sense, the order. Ideally, you'd want the volume to increase as you move up the pistons. But because you're visiting, you don't have the liberty to change all of their settings.
True, John. That's why I prefer to change the stops by hand sometimes, especially if I'm playing music that is easily constructed, well devised, with segments and episodes followed by different episodes, and in between of those episodes you change the stops, not in the middle but at the stop of episode, at the cadence, right? end of the section. Then it's really easy to use your one hand or the second hand or both hands to change the registrations. And it's more secure this way. You know exactly what to draw, what types of stops would you engage, and not to worry about the pistons being different or confusing.
I'm sure that many of your listeners would know one of the pieces I played was Nimrod from the Enigma Variations by Sir Edward Elgar. And I'm sure your listeners know that particularly the last line and a half of the piece, there's a crescendo that builds up to almost full organ, depending on how you want to express it, and then a decrescendo back down to, most people would go down to the quietest stop on the organ. And when I was rehearsing, my initial thought was to try and use these preset pistons, because then you can keep both hands on the keys and use your thumbs to ramp the volume down. But there was so many quirks of this organ. For example, sometimes when you pressed the lower pistons, it would take couplers off or not take couplers off. And I tried a number of times to get this smooth decrescendo using the pistons, and it got so complicated. I thought, there's no way I can remember all of this in the heat of the moment in a recital. So I did exactly what you said. I ended up making the sacrifice to go back to hand registration, and I thought, if I'm omitting the left hand, it doesn't miss out too much of the musical content. And at least that way I knew exactly which stops were the loudest to the quietest, and taking them off in the right order without disturbing the couplers.
That's exactly right. Do you know the famous photograph of César Franck when he's seated at the organ bench and playing with the right hand and using the left hand to draw the stops? So it's the exact situation here. You can free up one hand, which is not essential, like left hand sometimes. Sometimes it's the opposite, right hand, right? And then you could engage your stops manually. And that's how I usually do, except in cases where a symphonic music is played, like Vierne, Vidor, or Reger, late romantic, when you have to use those big waves of sound up and down, crescendo and diminuendo. Then to do this all by hand, it takes a lot of skill and incredible amount of practice. Speaking of which, how much time, John, did you have on the concert organ in St. Andrews to prepare?
So for the one in St. Andrews, which is my home church, I was practicing every day for about an hour for probably 2 months.
Oh, good way.
But for the Christmas concert in Victor Harbor, I only had 2 days and about 2 hours each day.
That's what we usually offer guest organists here in Vilnius University St. John's Church. A couple of rehearsals on two days for a couple of hours. That would be usually enough, but enough for very experienced organists, you see, for people who have tried probably hundreds of other instruments. Then it is enough, right? Was it enough for you?
I described it to one of my friends. I said it's a bit like preparing for an exam, whether it's a high school exam or a university exam. When is enough enough? I felt like it wasn't enough for me, but that is partly because of my inexperience and also being relatively a beginner on the organ. your technique isn't as well developed, and small hurdles that you have to deal with, taking away your focus can really subtract from your performance. I'd certainly would support your comments about trying to memorize things as much as possible. Just encouraging everyone that your suggestion is very wise, to try and memorize as much as possible, and particularly where I had to do stop changes by hand, it really helped having those sections memorized so that I could look away to pull out the right stop without it affecting my playing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Memorization sometimes is a lifesaver in concert performance situations, because then you can concentrate on the playing and not on the music, because it's deep ingrained in your mind and your fingers and your feet. I'm not saying you should play on autopilot though, right? You should always be aware what's going on and what's going on next, but it helps in the long run. It does take a lot of time to memorize, right, John? Right?
Yes, and some of the pieces that I played were things that I'd first learnt 5 years ago, and I was very interested in your podcast and article recently, or sorry, your questions with Vidas and Ozra. You were talking about how deeply to learn a piece, how long to stay on it, and one of your subscribers was talking about coming back to a piece and rediscovering it later on.
Mm-hmm.
And you and Ozra had a lot of fantastic thoughts, and I've found with many of my pieces, come back to it a year later, and there's such another level of deepness that I learn that with that piece, and how to convey it to the listeners, and being confident enough in memorizing it that you can really focus on conveying the musical idea, not just playing the notes correctly, which it's a big deal for young organists and beginning organists like myself. It's a big deal to try and get the notes right. But then to think about phrasing and articulation and conveying to the audience the musical idea, it's such a multi-dimensional approach.
Fantastic, John. We are getting close to the end of our conversation. Of course, I would wish to talk to you for hours, but of course, I know your time is limited, and let's for the ending part of our conversation, think about what you have learned the most. What is number one thing you learned the most in your recent Christmas concert at Victor Harbor?
I'll talk about it from a personal point of view first.
Mm-hmm.
The first lesson, the biggest lesson I learnt was that I'm on a journey, that everyone wants to be great now, and believe me, I wish that I could play like the great organists. I wish I could play like you, but everyone's got to start somewhere. And the thing that stood out to me the most was the journey that I'm on, that I can see how much my playing improved this time compared to last year. I can see the impact that it's having on the audience, that I can see that a couple of the pieces that I played this time that I'd played a few years ago, how much more fluent they were, how I conveyed the musical ideas. It was so exciting to realize what you can achieve over a period of time if you work hard. And so probably my biggest lesson was keep working hard on the right things, and trust that there'll be growth over time. It takes time. You have to be patient. someone very wise said to me once that humans always overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year or 2 years, but quite often we underestimate what we can achieve in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years. We think that we always think we can get more done in a year, but often you can't. But when you look back 5 or 10 years, you'll be very surprised that you've achieved more than you thought.
Definitely, John. It's a fantastic idea. It resonates with me. I recently reread the blog of James Altucher, the famous serial entrepreneur, who wrote recently that it's important to try to improve just 1% a day. Any type of skill, any habit that you want to build over time, you just have to improve 1% a day. And every 72 days, this amount of results doubles. And it compounds. So at the end of the year, you have increased your skill. Imagine how many percent, John? You're good at math. Tell me quickly.
A big percentage.
3,700%. Imagine that. If you improve daily just 1%, if you challenge yourself just for 1%, let's say in organ playing, right? If you have a piece of music, right, and it is a long piece of music, and you want to learn just 1% of that piece a day, 1%. If it has, let's say, 100 measures, you only have to get it right just one measure today, and the next day would be one measure. But after 10 days, right, this fragment will be a little bit longer because your skill compounds and you can learn faster after 10 days. And after 72 days, it's like double. You can do double, of course, things. So you can prepare this way for several recitals a year, right? If people can write a blog or posts like 1,000 words per day, it's like nothing, right? What can you do with 1,000? But after 1 year, you will have 6 or 7 novels written this way, right? If you want to exercise, right, and let's say you're very lazy or struggle with losing weight, it's no use of running marathon right away, right? But if you can run 1% of the marathon, right, less than 1 kilometer, right, 420 meters, something like that, everybody can do. And even if you cannot run, you can walk. Take a walk that distance. It adds up eventually and compounds, and after a year, any type of skill that you want to achieve, any type of good habit that you want to increase in your life can be immensely powerful. But by the way, John, the opposite is true too. If you skip one day of not playing the organ, it's no big deal, just 1%, right? Who cares? Tomorrow will play 2%, right? And maybe tomorrow you will lose this battle too and think, oh, another 1%, who cares? But this compounds, you see, and after 2 days, it's no longer 1%, right? It's 10% after 10 days, yes? So it's compounds, and it's so easy to keep losing this battle. But it's, on the other hand, it's easy to keep going. Just never break the chain. Keep a calendar handy and make crosses each day if you practice or not. And your only goal, John, and everyone else who is listening, is to don't break the chain of those X's on each day. Whether you're practicing for a long time or just 15 minutes, doesn't matter. Just keep those X's on the page every day, and you'll be increasing after 1 year 3,700% in your organ playing abilities. Isn't that exciting, John?
Yes, and we need. I think it's important to encourage so many of the subscribers because, you know, not everyone has the same gift of talent. Not everyone has had fantastic piano teachers and practiced heaps when they were young and teenagers and then gone to the conservatorium, and yet it's so vital that we have these people playing, even if it's just playing the hymns for a church service. I don't know what it's like in Lithuania or around the world, but in Australia, there's a real lack of organists and musicians to be able to play even for church services. And not everyone can be the international superstar like we were discussing Cameron Carpenter earlier. And funnily enough, I was watching some of his videos today, and we aspire to be like these great people. Or Thomas Haywood in Australia is one of the people that everyone loves in Australia. But to just be a little bit better each day yourself, and maybe we're not going to be superstars, but we can still have an impact on our community. And perhaps to finish off with a little story, I remember I'd given up on playing music for a while in my late teens, and my wife was very encouraging and supporting and got me back playing the piano again. And a few weeks ago, I was very, very fortunate. I was asked to be the pianist for the children's choir at our church, and we had the 9 lessons in carols, which is similar to what they have at King's College, Cambridge in the UK. And part of that service, we had all the children in the church sung a Christmas carol in the choir, in the kids' choir. And my son Timothy, who's 3.5, had memorized the whole of Joy to the World, all the 4 verses off by heart he'd memorized, and he was singing with the other kids in the choir. And after we'd finished, it was quite emotional for me because I reflected that it was 8 years, almost exactly 8 years ago, that my wife had got me playing the piano again. And that was one of the carols that I'd practiced to play for our family Christmas gathering. And I remember how many weeks I'd struggled trying to play a very basic version of that. And now, 8 years later, I was playing it for my son to sing in the choir. I was playing it from memory. I was looking over my shoulder at the kids the whole time, playing it like it was doing the most menial task at home. And it just made me realise how far you can go in 8 years.
Exactly. If you just improve just 1% a day, in 8 years you will move a mountain, actually. Wonderful, John. I'm so glad we met and talked about those things. It's so exciting to be able to enter the new 2018, right? The new year. What would be your New Year's wishes be for our listeners? I already said, please, guys, try to improve any type of skill that you want, just 1% a day. What would your wishes be, John?
So I've come to a realization in the last few months that I really have to improve my technique. And I've been on an awesome journey so far, but I need to get some of these foundations of technique laid properly if I'm going to be able to go any further. And somebody else's, one of the other organists is helping me out at the moment and going through all the Hanon finger exercises. And to be honest with you, I don't really like it. It's very hard work and boring. But you've said many times in your podcasts and articles that we need to face our greatest fears, and the things that scare us the most is what we need to do, because that was one of the things that put me off the piano and music when I was a teenager, was hours of boring exercises. But now I've done the full circle and realised that I need that to go forward. So in 2018, I think I'm going to be taking a bit of a step back from playing pieces and really concentrating on getting these exercises and dexterity and improving my touch and accuracy. And it's going to take some bravery, but I've committed to doing it, and this other organist is going to help keep me accountable.
Excellent. Improve your technique. This is a good wish for the next year, right? And improve just 1% a day, not more. Too much and you will quit, actually, John. You will quit. And too little, it will doesn't work, right? The progress is too slow. But 1% is just about right what you can achieve, right? Excellent. So if for example there are Hanon exercises, how many of them? 160, I think, right? 160. And there are 3 parts, and in each part, in the first part, there are like, I think 40 exercises or so. I forgot even now. But you can actually do 1% a day. You can learn half of the exercise at first, right? Around. Or one exercise if you want, if it's not too much. But I suspect it's too much a little bit. Maybe just up and next day down, right? But then you combine, the second day you do up and down, right? And it combines and compounds a little bit. So yeah, figure out what works for you, John, and what will work for me might not work for you, right? For other people might really be really boring. I'm not really 100% strict about scales and arpeggios. You see, Bach himself never played those things, right? And never wrote etudes for people, but he wrote inventions for his son to practice polyphonic 2-part pieces and 3-part sinfonias, which have intricate polyphonic movement between the parts. That could be also a good exercise to treat your repertoire like exercise too. Isolate sections and play them repeatedly. Transpose them into many other keys up and down, just like you would be playing Hanon. That counts, and it also improves your technique and pedal technique as well.
It's interesting, the organist who's suggesting this, back, he was a very, very good organist and a professional teacher in his day, and he said that he played through the whole book as a warm-up, which takes about an hour. And
it takes more. For virtuoso pianists, maybe it will take 1 hour. For people with 20 years of experience, yes. But for normal people like we, it will take at least 90 minutes. At least 90 minutes playing fast. But right now we cannot play fast, right? We have to play slowly first. So I don't think it has to be treated like religion and interpreted verbatim. No, you just have to treat it as a suggestion and see what works for you, what your goals are. Yeah.
Well, that's right, and I explained that for most people like myself that have a full-time job and a family, and playing the organ is our hobby or helping out the church, most of us, we'd be lucky if we had an hour total in the day to practice. And the
Yeah.
idea of spending 100% of that time on exercises is just completely unrealistic. So he was very good about it, and he agreed that I would spend 10 to 15 minutes on the exercises per day, and that's it.
Yeah, 15 minutes is okay. You warm up. You can also warm up with improvisation too. That's good. And also improves technique and improves your mind too, because you always have to think about keys and chords and progressions and modes. Good. Whatever works for you, John. Wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a lot. I hope it was exciting for you and for our listeners too. They got some inspiration for the next year, for the direction they might go, and figure out how they can improve 1% a day. All kinds of things, including organ technique.
Yes, and thank you so much to you, Vitus, and Osra as well for the wonderful, wonderful work that you're doing. And as I said at the beginning, I I don't know if I'd even be playing the organ if it wasn't for your generosity and assistance and all of the information and the training programs online. So, on behalf of all the subscribers, thank you very much. And I really hope that you'll be able to continue doing that in the new year.
Thank you, John, so much. Of course, Osha joins me in thanking you and other subscribers. Of course, you say we did impact on you, but we have to say the opposite is true. Without our readers, without our students and subscribers, we couldn't continue this work, right? How many years you could speak to the empty wall, right? Maybe a week or two or five, maybe a year, but 6 years, if nobody is listening, it would be, crazy. So if it wasn't for you, John, and everyone else who is listening and practicing and sending us questions and applying our advice and tips and supporting us, we wouldn't be here today, right? So everyone here is involved in this little community of secrets of organ playing, and we are very grateful for all of us for this opportunity that actually we're all living together at the same time. Our lives have crossed, right? Not earlier, not later, but today or this year, and maybe next year too. All right, John, before we end, tell us a little bit, what's the best way for people to connect with you online?
Yes, so my email address is john.eliza.higgins@gmail.com, and I'm sure you'll be able to include that in the podcast.
Are you active on Facebook?
Yes, I have a Facebook account under John Higgins.
Excellent. People will find you there. Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. Keep up your practice. Keep up your diligent work. Stay healthy. And actually, I want to say just one sentence about improving our all kinds of things. Like, how about improving our physical health 1% a day? Which means maybe getting more sleep, less eat, less unhealthy food, maybe flossing our teeth, right? Maybe all teeth at the beginning is too much, but how about just one tooth? 1%, right? One tooth a day, then two teeth, three teeth, and you will get this habit. Emotional health. How about improving our relationship with people, and sticking to people who we love, and with people who love us, right? And avoiding toxic people who just take our energy away. And how about improving our mental health, staying creative, and that's of course organ practice keeps this mental health also in good shape. And other things like writing, creating, documenting our progress and sharing it with the world. And the last one is improving our spiritual health, just 1% a day. That would be also one of the ways to do this, is to remember just 1% of your time in 24 hours, or maybe not 24 hours, but maybe you need 8 hours of sleep, so maybe 18 hours of day, right? Or 16 hours of your waking hours. 1% of those hours, you remember how grateful you are, right, for some of the things that you did today, or things that happened to you, or people you met. Gratefulness, right? So it also compounds, and everyone around us will be more happy, 1% happier every time, every day.
And can I also add to that to look around you too, and see if you can make the people around you 1% better. Because when you were sharing those things, the other organist who played with me at St. Andrews for the 20-year celebration since the organ was restored, I was able to help him and spend some time and become good friends. And without any motives or agenda, or just being friends, just being there for him, appreciating his music and learning from him. A few days ago, I had a text message from him inviting me to come and have a tryout on 2 very significant pipe organs in Melbourne. And it's amazing what happens when you enrich other people's lives. Sometimes amazing opportunities can arise that it wasn't as though you did it for them to get something. You just do it to be helpful and to be kind. And it's getting to. I'm going to play these 2 organs in Melbourne very soon, just to have a practice and try out on them, and it's going to be an incredible experience. I'll have to pinch myself to believe it's happening.
Fantastic. That's a good musical adventure which will be waiting you, right? I wish you all the best. And this was, of course, John Higgins from Morwell, Victoria, St. Andrews Presbyterian Church. And he's living in Traralgon in Victoria province. And we've been talking about how he discovered his progress in organ playing in 365 days. That was really amazing and inspirational. Thank you, John, and keep creating and keep sharing your progress with the world next year too.
Thank you so much, Vidas.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevičius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.